The smile that shocked a Galaxy K0 was not like others. Her body was massive, taller than any male in her species, broader than the strongest warriors. Her skin shimmered with dark purple scales, her arms thick with muscle, and her eyes held the weight of loneliness. On her homeworld, strength was praised in war, but mocked in a female. No alien male dared approach her. Some feared her, some laughed at her, but all of them stayed far away. She walked the space station halls like a ghost, seen but never greeted. Her heavy steps echoed in silence. No one spoke to her unless they had to. Even then, their eyes avoided hers. Xira had grown used to this. It was safer to be alone. She kept her head high and her heart buried deep. No one would see her pain. That was her way. But then, everything changed in a moment. It was just another day at Docking Bay 4. Cargo ships unloaded supplies, traders argued over prices, and mechanics moved from ship to ship with tools in hand. Xira was on her way back to her quarters after a long shift guarding the loading docks. She wore her usual armor, plain, scratched, but still strong. She avoided eye contact, as always. Then, she saw him. A human. Short, thin, with skin like soft clay and hair the color of dry wheat. He was holding a metal box and walking in her direction. Xira slowed. Most aliens changed their path when they saw her coming. But not him. He kept walking. And when their eyes met, he did something no one ever dared. He smiled. It was not a mocking smile. It was not fear. It was calm. Simple. A warm curve of the lips. A greeting. A sign of peace. Xira froze. Her eyes narrowed. Her body tensed. What was this human doing? Was it a joke? Was he trying to humiliate her like others had done before? She stepped aside, expecting him to laugh or say something rude. But he didn't. He just walked past her slowly, nodded once, and continued on his way like nothing strange had happened. Xira stood still for several minutes. Her thoughts raced. She looked around, but no one else had seen it. No one else had noticed the moment. The next day, she saw him again. He was fixing a panel on the side of a delivery ship. His sleeves were rolled up, showing thin arms covered in grease and small scars. He hummed a tune as he worked, and when he looked up and saw her, he smiled again. That time, she frowned. She approached him. Other workers nearby went silent. Some watched with shock, others moved away. Xira stopped in front of the human and stared down at him. "What is your name?" she asked, her voice deep and rough like stone scraping against stone. He stood up, wiping his hands on a cloth. "Ray," he said. "And yours?" "Xira," she replied slowly. "Nice to meet you, Xira," Ray said, and smiled again. "Why are you smiling at me?" she asked. "Because you looked like you needed one," he said without hesitation. Xira blinked. "You do not fear me." Ray shrugged. "Should I? I am a warrior. I have crushed men twice your size." "I believe you," he said calmly. "But I don't plan to fight you." His tone was not foolish. It was honest. She studied him for signs of sarcasm or hidden fear. There was none. He spoke like a man who had already made peace with himself. "You are strange," she said. "Maybe," Ray replied. "But so are you. That's not a bad thing." Xira didn't know what to say. For the first time in years, someone had spoken to her, not out of duty, not out of fear, but as if she was a real person. She walked away without another word. Her steps were slower this time. That night, in her small room, she looked at herself in the mirror. She touched her cheek where his eyes had rested. No one had ever looked at her like that. Not as a beast, not as a joke, but as something more. She told herself it was nothing, just a foolish human. A mistake, but deep in her chest, something had shifted. The next day, she found herself walking near Docking Bay 4 again. Not because she had a shift there, but because she hoped to see that smile one more time. And across the station, a human named Ray had already started humming, looking around, hoping she'd pass by again. Neither of them knew that their small moment had already become the start of something much bigger, something that would shake the galaxy, something no one, especially not the proud alien males, would ever be ready for. Asterisk her warning, and his calm reply. Xira didn't like the feeling growing inside her. It was soft, warm, and dangerous. She had lived her whole life behind walls made of silence and strength. But now, a simple human smile had cracked those walls. She had to end this before it went any further. The next time she saw him, she didn't wait. She walked straight toward him. Her steps were firm. her face unreadable. Ray was working under a maintenance pod, his hands deep inside a tangled nest of wires. When he looked up and saw her massive shadow, he didn't flinch. He simply smiled again. That was the final straw. Xira stood over him, voice sharp. Do not play games with me, human. I am not your amusement. Ray sat up, brushing his hands off on his pants. I didn't mean to play any games, he said softly. You smile at me as if I am your equal, as if I am not something to be feared. Ray raised an eyebrow. And why should I fear you? She narrowed her eyes. Because I could crush your body with one hand. Ray chuckled, not out of disrespect, but out of calm truth. Maybe you could, he said. But you haven't. That tells me more about you than your size ever could. For a moment, she didn't speak. Her jaw tightened. Other males, they fear me. They mock me. They call me a mistake of nature. I'm not them, Ray said simply. And you're not a mistake. His words hung in the air. No one had ever said that to her before. Not once in her entire life. Not even in her childhood. Xira crossed her arms. Do you speak this way to all who can kill you? Ray stood, dusting his clothes. Only the ones who look lonelier than they admit. She stepped back, shaken. Why do you care? He paused, then answered slowly. Because I know what it's like to be alone in a crowd. I know what it's like when everyone sees your body, but not your heart. That hit. Something inside her she didn't want to feel. She hated how his words touched old wounds. Wounds she had sealed long ago. She turned sharply, but before walking away, she said something she hadn't planned to. You are brave, human, or foolish. Ray smiled again. Maybe both. Later, that night, Xira sat alone in her room. She stared at her reflection, trying to remind herself who she was. A warrior. A protector. A weapon. Not a woman to be smiled at. Not someone soft enough to be spoken to gently. But the truth pressed at her chest like a rising flood. That human had seen through her armor, without ever touching it. Ray, too, found no rest that night. He couldn't stop thinking about her. Eyes, not the size of her body, not her strength, but the sadness that hid behind her calm face. He had seen pain before in people, but hers was different. It was ancient, heavy, carried for too long. The next day, they met again. Neither had planned it. Or perhaps, both had. This time, no sharp words, no warnings, just a long silence, and a question from Ray. Do you eat alone too? Xira was silent for a moment. Then she answered, always. Would you eat with me? Ray asked. The request shocked her more than any weapon ever could. Not even her own kind had ever invited her to share a meal. It was such a simple thing, but from him, it felt enormous. She wanted to say no. She should have said no. But instead, she nodded, and just like that, something changed again, not loudly, not with a fight, but with a quiet agreement between two souls who were tired of being alone. And the galaxy, still watching from afar, had no idea what was coming next. Asterisk a meal shared. A past revealed the table was too small for her. The bench too weak. The ceiling too low. Xira had never eaten in the station's common food court before, not once. It wasn't built for someone of her size or kind. Most aliens who sat there whispered when she passed. Some even left. She knew her presence made others uncomfortable. But today, she didn't care. Ray had chosen a quiet corner. A table near the back, where the lights flickered and the air smelled of fried root fish and old engine oil. He arrived first, placed a tray down, and waited. Some humans gave him strange looks. You sure you want to do this? One asked. Ray just smiled. Then she arrived. All voices fell silent as Xira walked in. Her massive form filled the room, like a shadow stretching across metal walls. Conversations died. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Chairs scraped as some quietly stood to leave, but Ray didn't move. He stood and waved casually like she was just another friend. Xira paused, her large shoulders tense. Then, she made her way to the table. She didn't ask if she was welcome. She Saturday the bench groaned, nearly breaking, but held. Her knees bent awkwardly, her armor creaking. Ray pushed her a tray of food, some protein blocks, steamed greens, and a flask of something warm. She looked at it, unsure. I asked the chef what your species can eat. He wasn't sure, so I just got a little of everything, Ray said, rubbing the back of his neck. You should not waste food on me, Xira replied. It's not a waste if we share it, he answered. She stared at him, then picked up a piece and bit into it. She chewed slowly. It was bland. But somehow, it felt different, because someone had thought of her. I was raised in a warrior camp, she said suddenly, her voice low. They taught me to fight at age 4. My hands broke bone before I could even write. My people believe female strength is a curse, a weapon to be used, never loved. Ray listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't try to offer false comfort. They called me names. Beast, mutant, cold blood, unfit to bond. Males laughed, but they also feared me. They would not come near, but they never stopped watching, waiting for me to fail. You didn't fail, Ray said softly. No, she said. But I stopped hoping. I became what they wanted. A silent weapon. Ray nodded. It's easier to be what they expect than fight for what they think you can't have. Xira looked at him, surprised. You speak as if you understand. He chuckled. Earth isn't perfect, Xira. I grew up small. Weak. Not the hero type. People ignored me unless they needed something fixed. Girls laughed at me. I stopped, trying to impress them. I focused on machines they don't judge. Xira's eyes softened just a little. So we are both built wrong for our worlds. Or maybe, Ray said, picking up a piece of bread, our worlds just aren't built for us. That made her pause. The thought was strange, and yet it made sense. She had always blamed herself. But maybe it wasn't her who was broken. Maybe the way others saw her was the real flawed as they ate. Xira noticed something odd. No one dared approach their table. Even the bold ones, the cruel ones, they stayed back. But they watched. All of them watched. And whispered. Do you care what they say? She asked Ray. He shrugged. Let them talk. I'm not sharing a meal with them. She felt her chest tighten, not in pain, but something else. Something unfamiliar. Could this be trust? No, it was too soon. And yet, for the first time in her life, she felt no need to guard her words. Not with him. When the meal ended, Ray stood. Same time tomorrow? Xira hesitated, then nodded. Yes. He smiled, then walked away, and as he disappeared into the hallway, she felt every pair of eyes on her. But for once, it didn't matter, because for the first time ever, she wasn't eating alone. And the whispers behind her? Let them come. They couldn't erase the warmth still on her tongue, not from the food, but from something far rarer in the galaxy. Kindness. Asterisk whispers and warnings the third time they sat together. No one pretended not to notice. Every eye followed them. Every tongue whispered. Rumors moved faster than light across the station. A human is courting the beast. He smiles at her like she's beautiful. Disgusting. Dangerous. Madness. That be why the end of the day, even station officers were whispering. The alien males, especially those of Xira's species, were the loudest. They scoffed in corners, their pride burned. She was theirs, by blood and race, even if none had dared claim her. And now, a fragile human had done what none of them ever dared, not with strength, but with a smile. That night, someone smeared a crude message on the wall outside Ray's quarters. Stay with your kind, soft blood. He saw it, read it, then calmly cleaned it off. Xira found out the next day. She didn't ask him about it. She simply stood by him as they walked through the market. Her steps louder, heavier. The message had been silent, but her presence was thunder. But the threats didn't stop. Late one evening, Ray stayed behind in the repair bay. As the rest of the workers left, four figures entered. Alien males, tall, armored, and smirking. You're making us look weak, human, the tallest said, cracking his knuckles. Ray didn't flinch. How so? You make her soft. You give others ideas. A beast like her is useful in war, not in whatever this is. Ray stepped back slowly. You mean kindness? The second male spat. You're insulting all males of her kind. If she bonds with you, we lose our place. Ray's voice stayed even. Maybe you never earned that place to begin with. That did it. Point one lunged forward, but before his fist could reach Ray, a shadow fell over all of them. Xira. She didn't say a word. She grabbed the attacker's wrist midair. With one twist, bones snapped. The others stepped back in fear. Her eyes burned with fury. Touch him again, she growled, and I will make you crawl like worms across the fuel lines. No one challenged her. They ran. Ray stood still, his breath a little shaky. Xira turned to him, eyes softer now. Why didn't you call for help? He looked at her with a small smile. I knew you'd come. She blinked. The simple trust in his words hit harder than any weapon. Not long ago, She was feared, mocked, and avoided. Now someone expected her, not as a monster, but as someone who would protect him. I don't deserve this, she said quietly. Ray frowned. Why not? Because I don't know what to do with it. He reached up, slowly, and touched the edge of her armor where her shoulder met her neck. Just a tap. Nothing more. Just don't push it away, he said. For a second, she didn't breathe. That eye in the control room above, cameras blinked. Records saved. Officers watching in silence. Rumors became warnings. She was not just dangerous anymore. She was bonding. And a bonded warrior of her size, loyal to a human, that terrified them more than her strength ever had. Asterisk, the first touch alarms had sounded before on the station, fire drills, airlock errors, even a docking accident once. But the alarm that rang now was quiet. No flashing lights, no sirens, just a coded report sent to high command. Unclassified bond forming between Class F giantess and human male. Risk level, unknown. Monitor closely. Xira didn't know that. Ray didn't either. All they knew was that something had changed after that night. She stopped avoiding eye contact. He stopped pretending not to look. They began meeting daily, not just for food now, but for conversation. Slow, cautious, honest. Words. And silence. Comfortable, healing silence. But peace never lasts long when pride is wounded. It happened 2 nights later. Ray was finishing his repair shift in the lower hangar, same as always. Xira had just left her guard duty post. They planned to meet near the cargo lifts. But the shadows arrived first. 3 males, not of her species this time. Mercenaries, paid by someone who didn't want the bond to continue. They didn't speak. They acted. Fast. Brutal. Ray fought back, but he was small. One held him down. The second raised a steel rod. A warning blow, meant to break bones, but not killed. It never landed. The rod froze mid-swing, caught in a massive hand. Xira had arrived. Her roar shook the air. Not just sound, but power. The kind that came from the heart. Not just the lungs. In a single motion, she ripped the rod from the attacker's grip and bent it in half like soft clay. She threw him against the wall. Another tried to run. She grabbed his leg and tossed him across the hangar. The third froze, begging. She didn't kill them. That was important. She knelt beside Ray, who lay bruised and bleeding on the floor. For a moment, her hands trembled. She had crushed armies, but now, her fingers shook at the sight of one wounded human. Slowly, she slid one arm under him and lifted his body with care. He groaned, but didn't resist. His blood smeared her armor. You're safe, she whispered. Ray looked up through a haze of pain and smiled weakly. I knew you'd come again. Then, something happened that made time stop. He reached up, past her armor, and touched her cheek. It was a simple touch. Soft. Human. Her eyes widened. No one had ever touched her face before. Not even her mother. His fingers left a trail of warmth on her cold skin. You're warm too, he whispered, barely conscious. And then he passed out. Xira held him against her chest, silent. The giant warrior who once broke necks now cradled. A man like fragile glass. Not as a protector, not as a soldier, but as something far more dangerous than as someone who cared. She walked through the station carrying him. No one dared stop her. No one even spoke. They only stared at the blood on her armor and the peace on her face. Ray woke hours later in the medical bay. His ribs hurt. His face was swollen. But when he saw her massive shape waiting beside the bed, he smiled again. You didn't leave, he said softly. Xira looked at him with eyes that held both fire and water. I won't ever, she said. And in that moment, something ancient inside both of them cracked open. Not just trust, but something far more feared by the galaxy. Something that could never be unmade. A bond. Asterisk, the trial of judgment. It was no longer a rumor. It was a report, labeled urgent, spread across military networks and council records. Confirmed emotional bond between human male and Class F giantess Xira. To most, it sounded like nonsense. But to those in power, it was dangerous. A female built for war. A human who made her feel. No one wanted to see what came next. Within 2 days, they were summoned, not invited. Ordered. Ray and Xira were brought before the Galactic Station Council, a circle of high-ranking officers, politicians, and species elders. The chamber was cold, wide, and sterile. Voices echoed like judgment before it was even spoken. Xira stood tall, towering over everyone. Her armor was cleaned, her posture proud. But her eyes were calm, not cold. Ray stood beside her, one hand still wrapped in bandages from the ambush. His face still carried fading bruises. But his back was straight, and he didn't step behind her. He stood with her. State your purpose, the lead counselor demanded. Ray spoke first. We came because you forced us to. Murmurs spread. A human speaking with defiance? Unheard of, the counselor glared. The station has rules. Emotional bonds between unmatched species are highly discouraged, especially between a weapon class. Female and a classy male. Xiri's voice echoed. I am no one's weapon, and he is no weakling. A second counselor leaned forward. This thing you are building with the human, it causes unrest. Alien males feel insulted. They say you have betrayed your kind. She looked at them, unblinking. They had 1,000 chances to see me. Not one dared. Ray added. They wanted her strength, but not her soul. The room fell silent. A third member, older, tried to sound neutral. This bond could bring political unrest. She is a symbol of power. If she bonds with an outsider, others may follow. Lines may blur. Then let them blur, Ray said quietly. If those lines keep. Good people. Lonely. They were never meant to stay. That shook the room more than shouting ever could. One of the generals whispered. And what if she turns violent to protect him? Xira stepped forward. I could have destroyed this council when I was dragged here in chains. I did not. Because I am not your fear. The silence turned heavy. No one dared move. Finally, the verdict came. Not as a law, but as a warning. You are both free to leave. But not together. If you bond, neither of you may return to this station. Or any other under the Unified Charter. You will live as exiles. They expected hesitation. Instead, Ray turned to Xira. Well, I guess we'll need a ship. And she smiled. Not the polite smile. Not the sad one. But the smile of someone who, for the first time in her life, was choosing her own future. Xira turned to the council. Keep your halls. We'll take the stars. Ray nodded. And if you ever need something fixed, you know where not to find us. As they walked out of the chamber, side by side, not looking back, the council sat in stunned silence. They hadn't just lost control. They had just witnessed something they couldn't contain. At a union born not of war, but of choice. Asterisk together. They realized the ship was old, scratched, loud in places it shouldn't be, held together by parts from 5 different worlds. But it flew, and it was theirs. Xira sat in the pilot's seat, her massive fingers resting gently on the controls. Ray stood beside her, adjusting wiring above the console with his usual calm. Outside the window, stars stretched across the black, like endless roads, and for the first time in both their lives, the road was open. They were exiles now. But they didn't feel exiled. They felt free. News of their bond spread faster than the council could suppress it. First came whispers on back channels, then secret forum posts, then songs sung in cargo bays and rewritten messages coded into trade signals. A human smiled at the warrior giantess, and she smiled back. Many mocked it. Some called it fake. But others began to hope that in distant colonies, alien females, once feared for their strength, began lifting their heads a little higher. Some messaged Xira in secret. One simply wrote, I never knew I could be loved until I saw him touch your face. Xira never replied. But she saved every message. Ray started fixing ships for small outposts. No official station would hire him anymore, but the broken ones didn't care. They paid in scrap and food, and sometimes stories. When people saw the towering figure working beside him, they often fell silent. But slowly, things changed. A small orphan alien girl once ran up to Xira, unafraid, and touched her scaled leg. You look like the hero in my bedtime story, she whispered. Xira knelt and gave her a small mechanical toy Ray had built. The girl beamed. Her mother cried. Ray noticed something else too. Xira was changing, not becoming softer, just lighter. Her steps less guarded, her laughter more real. One night, watching stars from the ship's roof, she said, I never thought I would be more than a weapon. Ray leaned beside her and replied, You were always more. You just needed someone to see it. Later, they received word. The very station that exiled them had fallen into unrest. Alien males protested for purity. Others rose to defend what they called bond freedom. The council tried to ban emotional ties between species, but it was too late. The moment Ray smiled at her, the seed had been planted. Now it was blooming. Across systems, some still hated them, feared them, called their bond unnatural. But many more watched from the shadows with quiet wonder, because if she, the untouchable, unwanted warrior, could be seen as beautiful, then maybe they could be seen too. Ray and Xira didn't set out to change the galaxy. They just wanted someone to eat with, someone to sit beside, someone to believe in. But sometimes, that's all it takes to start a revolution. And far beyond the systems that cast them out, aboard a ship stitched from spare parts and second chances, a human and a giant alien warrior charted their own course, not as outcasts, but as the beginning of something entirely new, something no council, no species, no law could ever stop.